Good day, everyone, and welcome to another Facebook Live from Westchester County, westchestergov.com. Certainly, I'm Ken Jenkins, Deputy County Executive, and today we're going to continue our conversations as we are going not just through the COVID crisis, and we have, our dual crises that we have going on, and with things that are happening from the George Floyd murder, and certainly all those things that walked from that particular perspective. We are pleased to have with us today a person that is in the eye of the storm of this. This is certainly a time for healing and understanding, and he's a leader in that area, and that is Tejash Sanchala, who is the head executive director of the Human Rights Commission. Tejash, I don't know, Tejash, good morning to you, right?
Good morning, Ken. Just another day, just a regular.
That's just another day. Yeah. Well, yeah, something we're going to take some time, and hopefully you and your family are around the world are safe and secure and sound. We're going to continue the conversation, but we want to talk from two different perspectives, because the Human Rights Commission, as you said, if they're looking over your shoulder, they see that everyone is welcome here with the rainbow flag right behind you, and making sure that that in Westchester, our Human Rights Commission is in a outstanding position to help and assist and go forward with the things that we have, the crises that we have going on right now. So again, Tejash, thank you for being here with us.
Thank you for inviting me, Ken.
So, so before we go backwards and kind of talk about, where we were, County Executive Latimer 2018, we walk in the office, and the very first thing that we do is we revitalize the Human Rights Commission. I believe we replaced 15 members out of the Human Rights Commission to revitalize that and get that moving. And, for a few seconds, let's talk about that, because Tejash, you I don't know, has it been a full year yet that you've been engaged in this?
Been here 14 months.
14 months, but it just seems like a day.
Every day is a blur right now, Ken. I'm sure it is for you too, but it's been very busy 14 months that I've been on the commission.
Well, something, let's talk about that. So tell us about the 14 months with the revitalization of the Human Rights Commission, getting engaged actively and involved, connecting, and certainly make sure you give a shout out to your chair and vice chair there, because if you don't, they'll remember that at the next meeting. So go ahead.
Thank you so much, Ken. So as we talked about, I joined the commission in April of last year as the executive director. The commission is very near and dear to me. I sat on the board for 8 years, from 2004 to 2012, and I helped write the Westchester County Fair Housing Law. And I'm proud to say the commission has a whole new leadership in addition to me. Last year, Valerie Daniele joined as deputy director. She brings with her 11 years of trial experience at HUD. Josh Levin rejoined the commission as the Fair Housing Director. He was the original Fair Housing Director, and he was most recently a judge at the New York State Division of Human Rights. So we have a whole new leadership team at the top. And as you mentioned, Ken, we have a whole new revitalized board on the leadership of Reverend Doris Dalton, who's our chair, and Reverend Dr. Stephen Pogue, who's our vice chair. And they both play important roles on the commission. In fact, every board member does. And we're doing our best with having virtual meetings at this time period. To give you a sense of how busy we've been in the last year, our education outreach efforts are up 355% in 2019, and our caseload is significantly up as well. The commission is tasked with educating and enforcing the Westchester County Human Rights Law and the Westchester County Fair Housing Law. We accept complaints of discrimination involving employment, housing, public accommodations, and credit lending. Some typical complaints that come to our office involve sexual harassment, disability discrimination due to inaccessible buildings or facilities, and failure to provide a reasonable accommodation due to a disability. That is very timely, and that's going to come up as we rephase into our workplaces and employees ask for reasonable accommodations based on a disability. This is the 20th anniversary of the Human Rights Commission. I'm going to let you talk, Ken, if you wanted to, about the county executive's key role when the commission was created in 2000. He was instrumental in the creation. And we, at the commission, We went to every single Kensico Dam Heritage Fair last year. We were out in the community, out in the public. We are not doing that this year for obvious reasons, but we have been asking the community and the public to contact us with any complaints of discrimination they have or hate incidents that they're aware of. Our phone number is 914-995-7710. You could also email us at humanrights@westchestergov.com. And we're currently looking at a number of situations where there's a pattern or practice of discrimination. So we ask the public to contact us if they're aware of any of those issues. And I know I speak for our team. We're in the office and been working remotely and in person during this time period, but we're particularly proud to be part of local government during this time in combating discrimination.
All right. Well, you know something. So you talked about folks working remotely and obviously participating on video conferences and working meeting via video conference as the COVID-19 crisis started. But you know, you all were from the Human Rights Commission were involved in it right before it actually hit our shores here because there were some things going on. So talk about what was happening with COVID-19. When we learned about the coronavirus and COVID-19 and some of the things that were happening from a human rights perspective.
Sure. It seems like such a long time ago, Ken, to think back to March and to think back to what when we were talking about the initial phase of the COVID-19 crisis. Initially, there were a couple of things that we with the commission. One, we were getting a lot of calls from the community about a relatively new law that was passed in April of 2019 called the Earned Sick Leave Law. The Human Rights Commission is tasked with providing information with regard to that law. And we were contacting and speaking with members of the public about a provision in law that says eligible employees can take sick leave in the event of a public health crisis. So we were speaking to community members about that. And then the second piece, which is what we talked about, is you, I, and the county executive appeared at a press conference at a Chinese restaurant in March to denounce racism and xenophobia that was particularly impacting the Asian American community. The commission gave presentations on xenophobia and COVID-19 related discrimination. We talked about the fear of the other that reveals itself whenever there's a public health crisis. What I like to tell people is the target changes, but the xenophobia and the racism does not. So for example, in prior public health crises, Italians were scapegoated during polio. The Haitians were stigmatized as carriers of HIV, and the LGBT community faced stigma during the AIDS crisis. There are many other examples, but what we were doing during that time is liaisoning with community groups in the Asian American community, including OCA, the Asian Pacific American Advocates Hudson Valley chapter. I think everybody knows Bill Kong. He was a big support and helped us connect us with some other community groups. We issued a statement denouncing xenophobia, and we stood in solidarity with our local community partners. I don't know if people were aware, there were almost 2,000 self-reported instances of discrimination by Asian Americans nationwide. Some Asian Americans were spit on, some had acid thrown on their face. Yeah, siblings were stabbed. And it's not hard to imagine why. We were hearing political rhetoric like Chinese virus, Kung flu, and that rhetoric and those actions led to consequences. And there was an irrational fear. And so we were doing a campaign of use facts, not fear. We heard anecdotal stories of discrimination involving the Asian American community in Westchester, but certainly not at the extent that you were seeing in New York City and California and other parts of the country. While I wasn't personally impacted by that, it did remind me of a time when, I was verbally and physically harassed after 9/11. And we didn't talk about how to speak out and speak out for each other. So when we talk about speaking out, the county put out a poster calling for an end to xenophobia, racism, and ignorance. That poster was circulated widely in the community. It's available on our Human Rights Commission's Facebook page. I ask everybody after this interview to go on our Facebook page, look at some of our posts, and follow it for information on it. Is separate and apart from the issues that the Asian American community was facing, we were also seeing other instances of discrimination and racism in our county. We saw instances of anti-Semitism, where multiple synagogues in Westchester County were cyber attacked during religious services. Right. We saw articles about white supremacy groups talking about, let's figure out how to weaponize this virus and infect the Jewish community, infect law enforcement. We also saw instances of Islamophobia in our community. So against that backdrop, we were also hearing about the disproportionate effect that COVID-19 was having on marginalized communities and communities of color. So it's been a busy time at the Human Rights Commission. That was just the first phase. That was before George Floyd. That was before the other things that we've been dealing with now. But I expect at the commission for us to see an increase in the number of cases as we start to phase in our workforces, as we start to remove from shelter-in-place policies, and when the moratorium on evictions expires in June or August.
And it is good. It's actually, so you say June or August, because June 21st is one set of dates, but August 21st is another set of dates. But we're not going to dive into that other than to say, hey, can you give us the numbers again? Because you said them really fast because you sound like a New Yorker, right? So can you say that again for the folks that are following along at home and online, the two numbers and the email address again?
Sure. Thank you, Ken. I apologize. So phone is the best way for somebody to reach us. It's 914-995-7710. You can also email us at humanrights@westchestergov.com. I try to return everybody's call the same day or by the next day. So if you are aware of any instance of discrimination, harassment, or hate incidents in the county, we want to hear from you. Please contact us.
And we'll give a shameless shout out again for when we went to the Chinese restaurant in White Plains, and I'm just making sure that we have the right restaurant name. Oh, it was definitely like one of the best restaurants that highly rated, Old Mandarin, right? So Old Mandarin in White Plains, and it was fantastic to be able to go out there. But again, just like we were pausing at that time, we were just starting to pause, that we were going to 50% occupancy. Actually, right after we had that particular event when speaking out with OCA, and meeting with the owner of the restaurant and talking to them at Old Mandarin, then they went to the 50% occupancy. And then 2 days later, we went to no restaurants at all. After that weekend, no restaurants at all, except for pickup and delivery services only. So again, we've been through this from March 3rd. I remind people for us in Westchester, and you were actually involved with it a little bit earlier from the Human Rights Commission, as you mentioned in the derogatory terms that were being flung about for the particular, for the virus, which is COVID-19, the coronavirus, right? SARS-2 CVS, CRS, for those that are really going to be techie about it. But you then, when we're starting to unpause, right? And we had some incidents that happened around the country that were murders and those kind of things of African-American, Mr. Aubrey in Georgia, and certainly other places where things happen. Then you have the horrific murder of George Floyd happen at the hands of a police officer, a former police officer now. And so what's been the Human Rights Commission's response to that kind of thing? Because again, we had people that have been not on the street at all. You know, we had businesses all shut down, and you had a lot of folks angry and justifiably so, to show the horrific nature of this particular crime. So what was the HRC doing?
It's, you know, if we were not busy enough in the initial phase of COVID-19, this has certainly added an additional layer to it. It's really a distressing time for our country and our community. And we're all, there's an emotional toll we're all feeling. You know, what I tell people is I think we're now dealing with a pandemic on top of a pandemic. We had the public health crisis, pandemic, and now we've got the pandemic of racism on top of that, and that's being intertwined. The death of George Floyd was not an isolated incident. You mentioned a few other instances, Ken, but you know, I was talking to a fellow attorney, and we were discussing that we've seen 3 different types of racism in the past month. We've seen overt racism when Ahmaud Arbery was fatally shot while jogging by 2 white men. We've seen structural racism when George Floyd was killed by police brutality. And we saw postmodern racism when Amy Cooper called the police because a Black man was bird watching near her in Central Park. And to compound things, and I want to just give some of these examples because I think it's important for people to see how prevalent it is. and to see the different systems of racism that we have. Ahmaud Arbery's example is compounded by structural racism as well for two reasons. One, that situation, there was a delay in bringing the charges. The charges might not have been brought if not for the video. Second, you have to think back and think about what Ahmaud Arbery's mother was told when she was contacted by the police about her son. She says when she was contacted by the police department, she was told that her son was shot and killed inside a house during the commission of a burglary. If not for the videotape, his legacy would have been that he died in a crime. Just think about that. His mother's memory of her son's last moments would have been based on a lie, if not for the video. And I'm going to paraphrase Thoreau here in a context saying people have been looking at the same thing, but we're only now starting to all see the same thing. And that's what we're starting to see, structural racism for what it is. And the first step is for people to acknowledge racism. Racism is not going to disappear overnight. This is going to require all of our efforts into combat and dismantling racism. But the first step is to acknowledge it. And I'm seeing many people are doing that now. This is an opportunity to have a discussion we should have had a long time ago about racial justice and equality in our country. Police brutality is just one symptom of structural racism in our country. I'm cautiously optimistic. I see unity rallies. I see vigils in all 50 states. I see them globally taking place in France, Italy, London. Schools are now talking about looking at their curriculum. Businesses are looking at their diversity and inclusion efforts. Heck, 6 of the top 10 best-selling books on Amazon have to do with race. So I'm heartened by seeing the vigils and the rallies, and I'm heartened by seeing the mosaic of people. I see young, old, Black, white, a whole, a real cross-section of our community. I was at the Scarsdale Vigil this past Sunday, and it was heartening to see that vigil was organized by Scarsdale high school students and former high school students, and they spoke out. And some high school students spoke out and said, you know what? I didn't learn about Black History Month until high school. I could tell you everything you want to know about the War of 1812. I could tell you everything else about other parts of our history, but Black history, I didn't learn about until maybe 10th or 11th grade. So people are starting to look at, maybe we need to look at our curriculum. Maybe we look at how we teach about race and we teach about our history, because racism is part of America's history. Most people don't know about the Tulsa Race Massacre that occurred 99 years ago this month. We've included information about race resources on our Facebook page. We've included information about books that you can look at, read articles you could see to become educated about it, and an information about the Tulsa Race Massacre that occurred 99 years ago. It reminds me a little bit of a quote when I see a good cross-section of our community, is that justice will not be served until those who are unaffected are as outraged as those who are. So that's only step one. Going to a rally, this cannot be it. You can't go to a rally, post it on your Instagram and say, look at me. And then when you walk to the parking lot and you see 2 Black men in a parking lot and you clutch your purse or you clutch your wallet, we all have to start looking inward and looking at our own biases and reflect what biases do we have? We all have biases. Everybody has an implicit bias. It's just that, do we recognize it? What can we do about it? But most of our biases are unconscious. And what makes that dangerous is that drives our behavior. So we're going to start having conversations about implicit bias. Now, when I talked about books that are being popular on Amazon, one book on the New York Times bestseller list, Ken, I'm sure you have it, and everybody I know has it, is How to Be an Anti-Racist. And I'm talking about, it's not enough to say, oh, I'm not racist. Well, it's not enough to say I'm not racist. You have to be an anti-racist and call things out when you don't see it. So we're going to try to keep providing information to the public and to the community on methods to do that. We've also put a link on our Facebook page about a wonderful documentary series called People Not Property. And it talks about the history of slavery in the colonial North, including the Hudson Valley region. And it's important for people to be educated about our history. I grew up in Irvington. I grew up in Westchester County, and I went to a program months ago before we sheltered in place that talked about the history of slavery in Irvington and slave houses. As somebody who grew up in Irvington, I was never taught that. I didn't know that. It turns out I played on many streets where there were slave houses. There's a lot of opportunity and resources that are out there for people to hear about our country. We will be organizing a series of programs on race and discrimination in the community. I think it's about time we start getting comfortable having uncomfortable conversations. And one last point I want to talk about is there's so much talk about COVID-19, and Dr. Fauci talks about, and the administration talks about, we should have a vaccine in 6 months, in a year. And while there's lots of talk about having a vaccine for the COVID-19 pandemic, we don't expect a vaccine for racism and the pandemic of racism anytime soon.
Well, something, one of the things, again, people should pay attention to, whether it's at westchestergov.com or your Facebook page, and making sure that they're for the Human Rights Commission's Facebook page to see those series of conversations that you're going to have throughout the county, to have uncomfortable conversations and to be working through various different tasks, because you have a set of groups that you're working through, right? To be able to, again, it's wonderful seeing the mosaic of the county and in the country, but in our county, the mosaic of the county that has every hue and shade, every size of individual, every gender, and gender neutral, and whatever things the folks are all together seeing, hey, wait a second, we just could not walk away from this particular problem. And again, the first part is recognizing that there is a problem, and because we were paused, because people were in their homes and they really didn't have a lot of things to do. You have this video that people may not have seen as much if they were in their normal lives. Certain people would obviously been impacted, and they would have seen that, and they would have been heartbroken by that, as all of us were watching somebody pass away in front of us, right? The challenge, again, as you said, is now it's not just going to a rally, and it's not going to go away even in 3 months or 6 months. This is going to be a commitment for people to make a change and to stay with that change. So anything else you want to add on that, Tejash?
No, I think those are all really good points. I do think we all just need to continue having the conversation. This can't be a situation where in 2 weeks we start talking about something else. We have to maintain our focus on having the conversation about racial justice and equality in our country.
And it's tied not to just the police aspect of it. And again, I always remind people as we go out and speak about it. My father being a former New York City sergeant, before he retired, was involved and engaged in the New York City Police Department. So we know that it is not just a thing that's just going to turn. It's not just a training class. It's not just showing up at a rally. It's not just changing the law, because one of the things I used to always mention about racism, racism is in somebody's heart. What happens, laws make it expensive or costly to express that thought. It doesn't change what's in your heart. So that what we're working on now is changing what's in the heart. And thank you for all the things that you're leading from as the executive director of the Human Rights Commission. There's one last piece to that. The county executive did create a task force to review training and the materials, and the Human Rights Commission, you specifically are going to be engaged on that task force. So again, that task force has not met yet, and they will, and we'll announce all the names to that. But we want to make sure to say thank you to you, Tejash, for all of the work that you continue to do. You and your entire team of individuals that are working together to make it together a difference for the people of Westchester County. Going, as you said, you mentioned that we're not having the festivals this year. That's because they've been canceled, not because you guys just don't want to show up, right? Because you're concerned about social distancing. That the festivals, because we can't control the crowd size and that kind of thing, but that does not mean you all are less busy. You have a dynamic group of individuals that are the Human Rights Commission, dynamic folks that are working on the Fair Housing Board. And as you mentioned before, the dual pandemics coming together, all of it is in the work of the Human Rights Commission.
Thank you, Ken. Yeah, it's a very busy time for the commission, but we are looking forward to engaging with the community on these conversations. And quite frankly, look forward to hearing from the communities if they see any instances of racism or discrimination, because we certainly do want to know about it. And although we can't go to these heritage fairs, we have been having virtual meetings, Zoom, WebEx, with different community groups, different organizations that have been presenting at boards and organizations, so we can continue getting the word out.
Well, Tejash, first, Tejash Sanchala, we want to say thank you to you for taking the time to first let people know all of the work that the Human Rights Commission is doing, the team that's been built up, and again, the commission members themselves who are volunteers, and they had representation at every one of those heritage events, and they go out to do education in the community. And at this particular time, it is so critically important that the Human Rights Commission is there for all the people of Westchester. And they have that opportunity again to call. So we'll give the number one more time, Tejash.
Last time, the number is 914-995-7710. And the email address is humanrights@westchestergov.com. I encourage anybody to contact us with any issues that they see in the community. And we look forward to working with the community to grow and to heal in this time period.
Well, thank you again. And I just want to make sure that we wrap up today by going to the point that you raised. County Executive George Latimer was the chair of the Board of Legislators when the Human Rights Commission was established 20 years ago. I happen to remember that because I was actually a speaker at that, and it was at the county center because that's how big this particular issue was. At the public hearing was held at the county center because that many people were motivated and engaged and bringing thoughts about it. Some folks that were obviously more people that were in favor of such a thing, but there were people that were opposed to the creation of a Human Rights Commission. And I just remember because George was carrying, the county executive, George Latimer, was chairing the meeting, and I was the last speaker before their break, about 2.5 hours in. And I remember saying, exactly, I'm standing between you and a restroom break, but it's important for us to have this conversation right now. So again, Tejash, thank you for reminding folks. County Executive Latimer, now Majority Leader Senator Stuart Cousins, former Chair Lois Bronze, were the architects of that. But again, it doesn't happen alone. It happens with the leadership of the county executive now, George Latimer, but he was chairman of the board, and I understand that. Again, Tejash, thank you so much for participating today and all the work that the Human Rights Commission is doing. Thank you so much. Thanks for everyone paying attention and listening and watching on our Facebook Live. Everyone continue to stay safe, and we'll see you tomorrow for Facebook Live.
Thank you, Ken. Bye, everybody.